I thought my husband sneaking into our 18-year-old daughter's room at 2 in the morning was a depraved sin. I was wrong. The hidden camera footage revealed something far more terrifying than lust. It was a cold, calculated plot to declare me insane and steal my entire empire. But he forgot one crucial detail. The true key to the fortune was never held by my innocent girl. My name is Valerie Sterling. As one of the most sought-after architects in Boston, I built my career on precision and stability. Structural integrity was everything to me. Yet I failed to notice the hairline fractures spreading through the foundation of my own home until the roof was about to collapse on top of us. My second husband, Derek, had always played the part of the doting stepfather to perfection. He was charming and attentive. But recently, the air in our house had shifted. My daughter, Chloe, who had just turned 18, was fading right before my eyes. The vibrant girl who used to debate me on art history over breakfast was replaced by a ghost. She was perpetually lethargic and forgetful. She complained constantly of splitting headaches the moment she woke up. I blamed exam stress or perhaps a teenage phase. I was a fool. The veil of ignorance was ripped away on a Tuesday night. I was up late reviewing blueprints for a new commercial complex in the Seaport District. It was 2 in the morning when I stepped out into the hallway to get a glass of water. The floorboards creaked. I froze. Derek was slipping out of Chloe's bedroom door. He did not see me standing in the shadows of the landing. The hallway light was dim, but it was bright enough to illuminate the sheen of sweat on his forehead and the terrifying look on his face. It was not the face of a concerned parent checking on a child. It was the face of a predator who had just finished a hunt. His eyes darted around with a cold calculation that made my blood run cold. A primal nausea clawed at my throat. My mind immediately went to the darkest place a mother's mind can go. Was he touching her? Was he assaulting my little girl while I sat downstairs drawing lines on paper I wanted to scream and confront him right there? But years of navigating cutthroat boardroom politics held my tongue. I needed proof. I needed to be certain before I destroyed our lives. The next morning, I moved with a mechanical precision. I waited until Derek left for his consulting firm. My hands shook as I installed a high-definition microcamera inside the casing of the HEPA air purifier in Chloe's room. It was invisible to the naked eye. Night fell like a shroud. I told Derek I had a deadline and locked myself in my home office. I was not working. I sat in the dark with my tablet glowing in front of me, staring at the live feed of my daughter sleeping. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. At exactly 1 in the morning, the door on the screen opened. Derek walked in. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. But then, the scene shifted into something I did not expect. He did not crawl into the bed. Instead, he pulled a pair of latex gloves from his pocket and snapped them on. He moved to her desk. He began to riffle through her drawers with the silent efficiency of a thief. He lifted her textbooks and shook them out. He checked under her mattress. He was looking for something. His movements were frantic, yet practically silent. After 10 minutes of fruitless searching, he walked over to the bed. Chloe was in a deep, unnatural slumber. He leaned down, his mouth inches from her ear. I turned the volume up to the maximum. "Your mother is crazy, Chloe," he whispered, his voice a slithering snake in the quiet room. "She is sick. She wants to control you. I am the only one who loves you. You have to sign the papers. Just sign them for me." He repeated the words like a mantra. It was hypnotic conditioning. I stared at the screen. The breath knocked out of me. The nausea returned, but this time it was mixed with a cold, hard rage. This was not sexual perversion. This was psychological warfare. He was drugging her. He was gaslighting her in her sleep. He was trying to find something she possessed, something valuable enough to destroy her mind for. He was not just a pervert. He was a parasite, and he had no idea that the host he was trying to kill had just woken up. The morning sun felt like a mockery of the darkness consuming my life. I maintained a facade of terrifying calm as I drove to work, but my mind was racing with a single objective. I needed to get Chloe out of that house and into a clinic for a full toxicology screening. The video was damning, but medical proof of sedatives in her blood would put Derek behind bars by sunset. I left the office at 11 in the morning, claiming a family emergency. I intended to intercept Chloe before she went to her afternoon classes. But when I pulled into the driveway of the estate my father had built, a sleek black sedan was already parked next to Derek's car. I burst through the front door, my keys clutched in my fist like a weapon. The scene awaiting me in the living room froze the blood in my veins. Derek was not at work. He was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, portraying the picture of a man crushed by grief. Flanking him were his parents, the Montgomerys, and sitting opposite them was a man I had never seen before, wearing a white coat and holding a thick file. "Valerie," Derek whispered, looking up with tear-filled eyes that made my stomach turn. "Thank God you are home. We found the camera." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You broke into my private network. I was changing the filter in Chloe's room because she was coughing." Derek lied smoothly, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "I found a spy camera. Valerie." Why would you film our daughter changing clothes before I could unleash the fury building in my throat? He tossed a leather-bound notebook onto the coffee table. "It was not mine. And this," he choked out, "we found this in your desk. You wrote about how you wanted to hurt her, to save her from herself. That is a lie," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. "I have never seen that book in my life. You are the one drugging her. I saw you last night. Mom, please stop." The voice was weak, trembling. I spun around. Chloe was standing by the stairs. She looked terrible. Her skin was gray, and her eyes were glassy, staring at me with profound terror. "Chloe, baby," I pleaded, taking a step toward her. "Listen to me. He is manipulating you. We need to go to the doctor." Chloe flinched violently, shrinking back into the arms of Derek's mother. You said if I didn't listen to you, you would lock me in the basement," she whimpered. "I'm scared. Mom, please don't hurt me." I stared at her, horrified. The conditioning Derek had whispered into her ear the night before had taken root. She truly believed I was the monster. "I have the video," I yelled, scrambling for my bag where I had put the tablet. "I will show you right now." I ripped the tablet out and unlocked it. My breath hitched. The file was gone. The folder was empty, replaced by hundreds of photos taken from weird angles, focusing on Chloe's body, making it look like I was obsessed with her in a sick, voyeuristic way. Classic projection stemming from acute stress psychosis, the strange doctor said, adjusting his glasses. "She is a danger to herself and others. The delusions are fully formed." George Montgomery, Derek's father and a retired lawyer known for burying the truth, stood up. He did not look at me with pity, but with triumph. He pulled a document from his briefcase. "This is an emergency protective order. Valerie. Judge Miller signed it 30 minutes ago based on the diary and the camera evidence. You are to vacate the premises immediately." "This is my house," I roared, lunging at Derek. "My parents built this." "You are a parasite." 2 uniformed police officers stepped in from the hallway. I had not even noticed them. They grabbed my arms, their grip bruising and firm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," one officer said sternly. "Don't make this harder." I fought them. I kicked and screamed as they dragged me toward the heavy oak doors. I looked back at my husband. Derek was holding Chloe, stroking her hair. He looked over her shoulder at me. For 1 second, the mask slipped. He smirked. It was a cold, satisfied curve of his lips that sent a shard of ice into my heart. He had won. He had turned my own protection against me. Beside him, Chloe stared at me, her eyes empty and void of recognition. The officers shoved me out onto the stone steps. The heavy door slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. I stood there, shivering in the crisp air, realizing with a dawn of horror that I had nothing. No keys, no wallet, no daughter. I had been erased from my own life in less than 20 minutes. 11 months is a long time. It is long enough to build a skyscraper from the ground up, but it is also long enough to completely dismantle a human soul. I was no longer Valerie Sterling, the celebrated architect. I was just Val, the woman who scrubbed congealed grease off plates in the back of a fast food joint in Dorchester for minimum wage. My hands, once capable of drafting intricate blueprints, were now red, chapped, and constantly smelling of stale fry oil. Every bank account I owned had been frozen. The legal system, manipulated by the twisted narrative George Montgomery had spun, labeled me as mentally incompetent. I could not access a single dime of the fortune my parents had left me. While I counted quarters to buy instant noodles, Derek and his parents were living in my mansion. They were driving my cars, drinking my vintage wine, and throwing lavish parties funded by the dividends of my hard work. But the poverty was not what killed me inside. It was the Tuesdays. Every Tuesday, I spent my meager bus fare to travel to the university campus. I hid behind the trunk of an old oak tree near the library, pulling my hood up to shield my face. I watched Chloe. She was a shell of the girl I raised. She walked with her head down, her shoulders hunched, looking frail and terrified. Derek was always there. He walked beside her, his hand gripping her upper arm tight enough to leave bruises, steering her like a lifeless puppet. I tried to get help. I really did. In the beginning, I called every lawyer I had ever worked with. They all hung up the moment they heard my name. The Montgomerys had done their job well. To the world, I was the unstable mother who had tried to hurt her own child. The worst part was knowing that Chloe believed it too. The look of blank terror she gave me that day on the steps haunted my nightmares every single night. Then came the night the bottom finally fell out. It was a Tuesday in late December. The wind was biting, cutting through my thin coat. I returned to my basement apartment to find my few belongings stuffed into a garbage bag on the sidewalk. My landlord stood in the doorway, his arms crossed. "You are late again, Val," he spat, not even looking me in the eye. I rented the room to someone with cash. "Get out, please." I begged, my teeth chattering. "It is freezing. Just one more night. Not my problem. Move." He slammed the door. I was left standing in the snow, shivering violently. I walked aimlessly for blocks until my legs gave out. I collapsed inside a graffiti-covered phone booth, the only shelter I could find. I curled into a ball, the cold seeping into my bones. I wanted to close my eyes and never wake up. It would be so easy to just let go. But then, a voice cut through the fog in my mind. It was my father. I remembered the day he taught me how to read a complex contract. The truth can be hidden, Valerie, but the original papers never lie. My eyes snapped open. The cold was still there, but the despair was replaced by a sudden, sharp clarity. I was looking for justice in a system designed to protect liars, but I had forgotten the failsafe my father had built for me. I dug into my pocket. I had exactly 3 quarters and a dime. It was just enough for a local call. My fingers were so numb I could barely press the buttons. I dialed a number I had memorized 20 years ago but never used. It rang 4 times. I held my breath, praying he was still alive, praying he still had the same number. "Hello." A gruff, weary voice answered. "Arthur," I whispered, my voice cracking from the cold. It is Valerie Sterling. I need help. There was a long silence on the other end. For a second, I thought he had hung up. Valerie, he said, his tone shifting from weary to alert. Where are you? I have been waiting for this call for nearly a year. I gave him the intersection. 20 minutes later, a rusted sedan pulled up to the curb. The heater was rattling, and the engine sounded like it was dying. But to me, it looked like a chariot. The window rolled down. Arthur was older than I remembered, his face lined with deep wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp and clear. Get in, he said, unlocking the door. We have a lot of work to do. I climbed into the passenger seat, the warmth of the car wrapping around me. As we drove away from the curb, leaving the frozen hell of my past life behind, I looked at my reflection in the side mirror. The architect was gone. The victim was gone. The woman staring back was someone new, someone forged in ice and fire, and she was ready for war. Arthur drove us to a nondescript building in the old industrial district. Inside, it was a fortress of paper, a cramped, dusty room above a dry cleaner that smelled of starch and old coffee. But as he locked the steel-reinforced door behind us, I felt safer than I had in years. He motioned for me to sit on a worn leather chair and placed a thick, sealed envelope on the desk between us. Derek thinks he has won, Arthur said, his voice gravelly but steady. He thinks he holds the keys to the kingdom because he has physical custody of Chloe, but he is trying to open a vault with a crowbar when he needs a laser. I leaned forward, wrapping my hands around a mug of hot tea he had made me to stop my shivering. What do you mean he has the house? He has the accounts. He has the liquid assets, the pocket change, Arthur corrected, opening the file. But the sterling trust, the core capital your father built, is locked tight. Why do you think he was tearing Chloe's room apart that night? The memory of Derek's frantic searching on the camera feed flashed in my mind. He was looking for something. I thought it was her diary. No, Arthur shook his head. He was looking for the platinum seal. It is a physical signifier required to transfer the primary inheritance. And here is the kicker. Valerie, the transfer age is not 18. It is 19. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. 19. But she turns 19 next week. Exactly. Derek read the summary, but he never saw the addendum. He thought he could bully her into signing at 18. When the funds did not unlock, he panicked. He went hunting for the seal, thinking she had hidden it. Tears welled in my eyes, spilling over onto my cheeks. So the money is safe. She hasn't signed it away. The money is safe, Arthur said, his expression darkening. But Chloe is not. Since he could not get the money through the trust transfer, he has moved to Plan B. He is drowning in gambling debt. Valerie. He owes nearly $4 million to people who do not accept IOUs. He plans to marry her off to a business partner of his in a sham wedding next week to access her marital assets. A cold chill went through me. My daughter was not just a pawn, she was livestock to him. He was selling her to cover his own failures. We need to stop him, I said, my voice trembling. We will, Arthur replied. He turned his laptop around. But first, we need ammunition. You were smart. Valerie, you set up a cloud backup for that camera. Derek destroyed the tablet, but he didn't know about the remote server. My heart stopped. You have the footage. All of it. He clicked a file. The video was grainy but clear enough. It showed Derek standing by Chloe's bedside table. He picked up her bottle of brain supplements vitamins she had taken since she was a child. He dumped them out and replaced them with white pills from an unmarked bag. Sedatives, Arthur confirmed. High-dose antipsychotics. That is why she is lethargic. That is why she is compliant. He has been poisoning her to keep her docile. Something inside me snapped. The last remnant of the scared, victimized woman I had been for the past year and a half burned away in the heat of pure white-hot rage. I stood up and walked to the small bathroom in the corner of the office. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. My hair was long, matted, and graying, a symbol of my neglect. I found a pair of rusty scissors on the sink. Valerie Arthur called out, "What are you doing?" I did not answer. I grabbed a handful of hair and sheared it off. Clump after clump fell into the sink. When it was jagged and short, just above my chin, I found a box of black hair dye under the sink that Arthur's wife must have left years ago. An hour later, I walked back out. My hair was jet black, sharp, and severe. I looked like a different person. I looked like a weapon. "Get me the files on the gambling debts," I commanded, my voice devoid of fear. "We are not just going to stop the wedding. We are going to bury them." Arthur smiled, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. "The party is on her birthday, next Saturday." "Perfect," I said, staring at the calendar on the wall. "They want a show, I will give them a show. I swear to you. I will make them pay for every single second my daughter felt alone." The Sterling estate was ablaze with lights, looking like a beacon of stolen triumph against the night sky. It was my daughter's 19th birthday, and my husband had spared no expense to turn it into a coronation. From the edge of the driveway, I could see the line of limousines depositing Boston's elite. They were there to witness what Derek called a celebration, but I knew it for what it was. It was an auction. He was parading Chloe in front of his creditors and business partners, preparing to announce her engagement to a man twice her age to secure his financial safety net. I waited until the clock struck 8. Inside the grand ballroom, the scene was nauseating. Through the open French doors, I saw Chloe. She was seated on a velvet throne like a display doll, dressed in a gown that cost more than my apartment rent for 5 years. But the light was gone from her eyes. She slumped slightly, her gaze fixed on the floor, her hands resting limply in her lap. She looked like a ghost in a golden cage. Beside her, Derek's parents laughed loudly, clinking crystal flutes of champagne, reveling in the empire they had hijacked. Derek stood at the center of the room and tapped the microphone. The murmur of the crowd died down. He beamed, the picture of a proud stepfather. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek announced, his voice smooth and confident. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate my darling Chloe. Tonight is not just about a birthday. It is about the future. Since her mother tragically cannot be here due to her condition, I will be stepping in to manage the transition of the trust." That was my cue. I nodded to the head of my private security team. 2 burly men pushed the heavy oak doors of the main entrance wide open. They slammed against the walls with a thunderous boom that echoed like a cannon shot. I stepped into the light. I was not wearing the rags of a dishwasher. I was dressed in a tailored white suit that gleamed under the chandeliers, sharp and pristine. My hair was dark and severe, my chin held high. I did not walk. I marched. Behind me, Arthur walked in step, clutching a briefcase like a shield, flanked by 4 stone-faced bodyguards. The silence was instant and absolute. The live band stopped playing. A waiter dropped a tray of hors d'oeuvres, the crash shattering the stillness. Derek stared at the stage. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and smashed onto the marble floor, spraying crystal and liquid over his polished shoes. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His mother, recovering from her shock, lunged forward from the side of the stage, her face twisted into a snarl. "You!" she hissed, her voice cutting through the quiet room. I thought you had rotted away in some asylum by now. How dare you show your face here?" I did not even look at her. To me, she was nothing more than dust on a windowsill. I kept my eyes locked on the girl sitting on the throne. I walked straight through the parting crowd, the guests recoiling as if I were made of fire. I stopped at the foot of the dais. Chloe slowly lifted her head. Her eyes struggled to focus, fighting through layers of sedation. She blinked. Once. Twice. Mom. The word was a fragile whisper, barely audible. But it broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. Derek snapped out of his trance. He jumped down from the stage, rushing to block my path to Chloe. He held up a hand, his face regaining its mask of righteous indignation. "Security!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Get this woman out of here! She is dangerous! There is a restraining order. She cannot be within 500 feet of my daughter." 2 of his hired guards moved toward me, reaching for their belts. "Do not take another step." Arthur's voice boomed across the hall. It was deep, authoritative, and filled with the weight of the law. Arthur stepped in front of me, holding up a document stamped with a red seal. That restraining order was vacated at 9 o'clock this morning by the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, Arthur declared, his words ringing out clearly for every guest to hear. Based on new, irrefutable evidence of medical fraud and coercion. Ms. Sterling has every legal right to be in her own home. Derek froze. The room erupted into whispers. I stepped around my husband, who was now trembling visibly, and reached my hand out to my daughter. "I am here. Chloe," I said softly, "and I am never leaving you again." Derek recovered from his momentary paralysis with the desperate agility of a cornered rat. He stepped in front of Chloe, shielding her from me as if I were a contagion. He turned to the stunned crowd, his hands raised in a plea for understanding. "Please, everyone, stay calm," Derek shouted, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead again. "This is exactly what I was talking about. She is here to harass us. Look at her. She is manic. She is trying to trigger a breakdown in our poor daughter. I am trying to protect Chloe from this madness." He looked convincing. He always did. A few guests murmured in agreement, looking at me with suspicion. I did not scream. I did not argue. I simply smiled, a cold, sharp curve of my lips that did not reach my eyes. I raised my hand and signaled to Arthur. Arthur connected his laptop to the main AV system of the ballroom, the giant projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a slideshow of Chloe's childhood photos, flickered and turned black. "Let us see who the real monster is," I said softly. The screen roared to life. The footage was grainy, stamped with a date from 2 years ago. It showed the interior of Chloe's bedroom in the dead of night. The silence in the ballroom was heavy, suffocating. Every eye was glued to the screen as the door creaked open and Derek crept in. The guests watched in horrified fascination as the man standing on the stage, the man posing as a loving father, pulled on latex gloves and ransacked a sleeping girl's room. But the gasps truly started when the audio kicked in. The speakers amplified his whisper, making it sound like a demonic chant. "Your mother is crazy. Only I love you. Sign the papers." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. The clinking of silverware stopped. The whispers began, rising like a tide. Is that Derek?" a woman in the front row asked, her voice trembling. "He is gaslighting her in her sleep," another man muttered in disgust. Derek stared at the screen, his face pale as a sheet. But we were not done. The video cut to a black screen, and an audio recording began to play. It was crystal clear, recorded just 3 days ago. She is starting to remember things. "Dad." Derek's voice whined through the speakers. "The drugs aren't suppressing the memories as well as they used to. Once I get the signature for the trust transfer next week. We need to handle her. Maybe an accident or a permanent institutionalization. She is becoming a liability." The room erupted. It was no longer a party. It was a crime scene. Derek's mother, realizing the walls were closing in, let out a shriek of rage. She lunged toward the AV table, her manicured claws reaching for the cables. Turn it off, she screamed. One of my bodyguards stepped in her path. He did not touch her. He simply stood there like a granite wall. She slammed into his chest and bounced back, stumbling in her high heels. I looked at Chloe. The fog in her eyes had cleared, burned away by the shock of the truth. She looked up at Derek, the man she had trusted, the man who had turned her against me. She stood up, her legs shaking, and backed away from him as if he were holding a knife. "You!" Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. "You wanted to kill me!" She turned and ran to me, hiding behind my back, clutching the fabric of my white suit. I put an arm around her, feeling her tremble against my side. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I walked up the steps of the stage and held it up for the room to see. "This is a hair follicle toxicology report from a sample I managed to get from Chloe's brush last week," I announced, my voice ringing with steel. "It shows positive results for high levels of benzodiazepines and hallucinogens. He has been feeding them to her for 18 months. I turned to Derek, my eyes burning into his. "You did not just steal my house. Derek, you did not just steal my money. You poisoned my daughter." The accusation hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Derek looked at the crowd. He saw the judgment, the disgust, the closed ranks of the society he so desperately wanted to impress. There was no way out. The facade crumbled completely. He dropped to his knees. "I had to," he wailed, tears streaming down his face, snot running from his nose. It was pathetic. "I owe them money. They were going to break my legs. I didn't want to hurt her. I just needed the money. Valerie, please, help me." He crawled toward me, reaching for the hem of my pants. A broken, weeping mess of a man. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing but contempt. The trap had snapped shut. The sound of sirens cut through the evening air like a knife, signaling the end of the charade. On Arthur's cue, a dozen uniformed officers stormed through the main entrance, their tactical boots thudding heavily against the marble floor. The guests shrieked and scattered to the edges of the ballroom, leaving the Montgomery family exposed in the center of the room like rats caught in a spotlight. "Police, nobody move." George Montgomery, the man who had once terrified opposing counsel with a single glare, was now frantically tapping on his phone. His trembling fingers dialed number after number, seeking a lifeline from the judges and senators he used to control. But the line remained silent. His era of influence had evaporated the moment the truth hit that screen. He lowered the phone, his face gray and defeated, realizing that no one was coming to save a monster. But Derek was not ready to accept defeat. His eyes darted around the room with the frantic energy of a cornered animal. His gaze landed on Chloe. "If I go down, you are coming with me!" Derek screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. He lunged toward my daughter, his hands reaching out to grab her, intending to use her as a human shield to bargain his way out. My body moved before my brain could even process the thought. It was pure, primal instinct. I threw myself between the predator and his prey. Derek slammed into me with the force of a freight train. He shoved me violently, and I flew backward, my lower back colliding hard with the sharp edge of the banquet table. Pain exploded up my spine, stealing the breath from my lungs. I collapsed to the floor, gasping. But as Derek tried to step over me to get to Chloe, I lashed out. I wrapped my arms around his leg, locking my fingers together in a death grip. "Let go!" he shrieked, kicking at me. "Let go of me, you crazy bitch!" I gritted my teeth, ignoring the bruising impacts of his kicks against my ribs. I would have let him break every bone in my body before I let him touch a hair on her head. "Chloe, run!" I choked out. Seconds later, the officers swarmed him. 3 men tackled Derek, driving his face into the marble floor. I released his leg and rolled onto my back, watching as they twisted his arms behind him and slapped the cuffs on his wrists. Mom Chloe fell to her knees beside me, her tears falling onto my face. She pulled me into a hug so tight it hurt, but it was the most beautiful pain I had ever felt. I am so sorry. She sobbed, her body shaking uncontrollably against mine. I am so sorry. Mom, I didn't know. I really didn't know. It is okay, I whispered, stroking her hair. I have you. I have you now. We watched from the floor as the police marched the Montgomerys away. George and his wife were handcuffed, their heads bowed in shame as they were led past the very socialites they had tried so hard to impress. Derek was dragged out last, thrashing and screaming obscenities, right into the waiting glare of the media cameras outside. The live stream of his arrest would be the top story in Boston for weeks. I groaned as I sat up. A paramedic rushed over, but I waved him away. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my white suit. My back throbbed, and I knew I would be covered in bruises by morning, but I felt taller than I ever had in my life. I looked out at the room full of gawking guests, the fair-weather friends who had abandoned me, the gossip-mongers who had relished my downfall. This party is over, I announced, my voice steady and cold. Get out of my house, all of you, now. They did not need to be told twice. The ballroom emptied in minutes, leaving only the echo of the chaos behind. That night, the mansion was silent for the first time in 2 years. It was a heavy, large silence, but it was ours. Chloe and I did not sleep. We spent the hours until dawn walking through the rooms, pulling down the gaudy drapes Derek's mother had hung and tossing the expensive vases she had bought into trash bags. We were scrubbing away their stain on our lives, one object at a time. The weeks following the arrest were a blur of white coats and quiet tears. The physical detox from the cocktail of sedatives Derek had fed Chloe was brutal. She spent days shivering in her bed, sweating out the poisons, while I sat by her side, holding her hand until my own fingers went numb. The psychological wounds were even harder to treat. We hired a top trauma specialist to help untangle the web of lies Derek had spun in her mind, peeling back the layers of gaslighting one by one. While Chloe healed, I went to war on a different front. I hired a team of forensic accountants and ruthless lawyers to audit the wreckage Derek had left behind. The reports were sickening. In just 2 years, he had liquidated nearly every movable asset. My mother's vintage jewelry collection was gone. The emergency funds were drained. He had even embezzled over $300,000 from our family charity foundation to pay off his gambling sharks. The financial mess was catastrophic. However, the accountants were baffled by one thing: the Sterling Trust, the massive capital reserve my father had built, remained untouched. I sat Chloe down in the sunroom one afternoon. She was looking better, the color returning to her cheeks, though her eyes were still haunted. He tore my room apart every night, Chloe said softly, staring at her tea. He was looking for a seal, the platinum seal. He screamed at me once, asking where I hid it. Mom. What was it? Did I lose it? I reached across the table and took her hand. You never lost it, honey. You could not lose it. I explained to her that the platinum seal was never a physical object. It was a failsafe my father and I designed. It was a unique biogenetic code encrypted within her own blood markers, readable only by a specific scanner at the bank vault. You were the key. Chloe, I told her. He could not force you to sign it over because the trust required your biological presence and a scan of your blood at the age of 19 to activate. He was looking for a stamp or a ring that did not exist. Chloe stared at me, her eyes filling with fresh tears. You protected me even when you weren't here. And I believed him. I thought you abandoned me. He is a professional liar, I said firmly. Do not blame yourself. I am so sorry. Mom. She sobbed, squeezing my hand. I am so sorry. We channeled our grief into action. We decided to purge the house of every trace of the Montgomerys. We spent the next weekend throwing things out. The gaudy paintings Derek's mother had hung, the leather recliners Derek loved, the expensive rugs, we tossed it all into a dumpster I rented. We bought buckets of paint and covered the dreary gray walls they had chosen with bright, warm creams and yellows. We were reclaiming our sanctuary. Then, I returned to my firm. The moment I walked into the lobby, the atmosphere shifted. I called an all-hands meeting and publicly fired the 3 senior partners who had sided with Derek and helped validate his claims of my insanity. I took back my corner office and began the hard work of rebuilding the reputation and the business empire they had tried to crumble. Chloe made a big decision, too. She withdrew her enrollment from the university for the upcoming semester. "I cannot go back to school yet," she told me one evening over dinner. "I want to help. There are other girls. Other people being controlled like I was." She decided to take a gap year to work alongside me in launching a new initiative for victims of domestic financial abuse. Our evenings became our favorite time. We cooked simple dinners, pasta, roasted chicken, things that felt like home. There were no more lavish parties, no more fake smiles for society cameras. Just the 2 of us, sitting at the kitchen island, laughing over burnt garlic bread, rebuilding our bond one meal at a time. The house was no longer a prison. It was a home again. The trial of the Commonwealth versus the Montgomery family began 6 months later. It was the spectacle Boston had been waiting for. The courthouse was surrounded by news vans, and the gallery was packed with reporters and the same socialites who had once sipped champagne at Derek's parties. Chloe and I walked into the courtroom with our heads held high. We wore matching navy blazers, looking healthy, vibrant, and untouchable. In stark contrast, the defendants looked like ghosts of their former selves. Derek was gaunt, his expensive tan replaced by a prison pallor. His parents, George and Eleanor, sat slumped in their chairs, looking old and withered. The defense strategy was predictable. Derek's lawyer, a man with a sheen of sweat on his upper lip, tried to paint his client as a victim of severe gambling addiction and temporary insanity. My client was not in his right mind, the lawyer argued, gesturing theatrically to the jury. He was under immense pressure. He did not intend to cause permanent harm. He needs psychiatric help, not prison. I sat in the witness stand, listening to this fabrication with a stoic expression. When it was my turn to speak, I did not need theatrics. I had facts. This was not madness. I told the jury, my voice steady and clear. This was math. My legal team projected the forensic analysis of Derek's laptop onto the screens. It was not the ramblings of a madman. It was the cold, hard research of a killer. Here. I pointed to the screen, dated 3 months before the incident. Search queries for how to induce memory loss with pharmaceuticals. And here, a week later, inheritance laws when a ward dies of natural causes. And this one, undetectable poisons. The jury gasped. The insanity defense crumbled instantly under the weight of premeditated malice. Then came the final nail in the coffin. The prosecution called Dr. Eris, the corrupt doctor who had declared me insane that terrible afternoon. He had cut a plea deal. He sat on the stand and pointed a shaking finger directly at George Montgomery. He paid me $50,000. Dr. Eris confessed, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Montgomery gave me the cash in a briefcase. He told me to falsify the psychiatric evaluation to trigger the emergency guardianship clause. That was when Eleanor Montgomery snapped. She leaped from her chair, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You ungrateful witch!" she screamed, lunging toward me before the bailiffs grabbed her arms. "We took you in. We gave you a family. You ruined us. You deserve to rot in the street." Her outburst did more to convict them than any evidence I could have presented. The jury saw the true face of the Montgomery matriarch, a woman who believed she was entitled to destroy lives for profit. The sentencing came 3 days later. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly been disgusted by the evidence of child abuse, did not hold back. Derek Montgomery, she announced, her voice booming through the silent courtroom, for the crimes of fraud, false imprisonment, and assault with a deadly substance. I sentence you to 25 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Derek squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking out. George and Eleanor Montgomery. The judge continued. For conspiracy, judicial fraud, and aiding and abetting. You are each sentenced to 15 years. The gavel came down with a sound that felt like liberation. The judge also granted our motion for restitution. Every single asset the Montgomerys owned their remaining properties, their stocks, their pensions was seized to repay the funds Derek had stolen from my accounts and the charity. They were leaving that courtroom with absolutely nothing. As the bailiffs hauled them away, Derek turned his head. He looked at me across the aisle, his eyes pleading for a shred of mercy or perhaps just acknowledgement. I did not look back at him. I turned my head to the right, looking directly at my daughter. Chloe squeezed my hand, a small, relieved smile gracing her lips. The nightmare was legally, physically, and emotionally over. We were free. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves of the old maple tree shading my father's grave. The air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and new beginnings. I knelt in the grass, placing a bouquet of pristine white orchids against the cold granite headstone. Beside me, Chloe stood in respectful silence, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. We did it. Dad, I whispered to the stone. The legacy is safe. The family is safe. Walking back to the car. Chloe stopped. She turned to me, her eyes clear and bright, lacking the glassy haze that had haunted me for so long. Mom, she said softly, twisting a ring on her finger. I wanted to tell you something. Back when I was confused, when the drugs made everything foggy. I still remember things. I remember you coming in at night. I remember you fixing my blanket. Even when he told me you were dangerous, my heart knew. It knew you were safe. I pulled her into a hug, blinking back tears. I will always protect you. Chloe, always. That evening, in my home office, I opened the safe and pulled out the access codes for the Sterling Trust. I laid them on the desk in front of her. It is yours, I said. You are 19. You are the rightful beneficiary. You can access the funds whenever you want. Chloe looked at the documents, then pushed them back toward me. No, she said firmly. Not yet. I don't want to just inherit it. Mom, I want to earn it. I want you to teach me how to manage it first. I want to be like you. My chest swelled with pride. She was not just my daughter. She was my partner. A week later, Arthur came to the house. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. It is from Derek, Arthur said, his voice low. He sent it from prison. He claims there is more to the story. He says he wants to meet. He claims there was a mastermind behind him, someone who put the idea in his head. I took the letter. It felt heavy with toxicity. I looked at the handwriting that I had once thought was romantic, now just scrawls of a desperate narcissist. I did not open it. I walked over to the fireplace where a log was crackling. Valerie Arthur asked, "Don't you want to know I tossed the envelope into the flames?" The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash in seconds. No one matters more than the present. Arthur, I said, watching the fire consume the last link to my pain. The past died along with my trust in him. I refused to let his ghost haunt my future for even one more second. He did not get to have a sequel. We used the restitution money seized from the Montgomerys to build something beautiful. We founded the Chloe Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier legal aid to widows and children who had been cheated out of their inheritances by predatory guardians. Every dollar Derek had stolen was now being used to destroy men just like him. The story ends not in a courtroom, but in our backyard. It was Chloe's 20th birthday. There were no cameras, no press, and no fake socialites. There were just 20 of her closest friends from the volunteer center, Arthur grilling burgers and laughter ringing in the air. I stood on the porch, holding a glass of iced tea, watching my daughter blow out the candles on a simple chocolate cake. Her face was glowing with genuine joy. I realized then that the sweetest revenge was not seeing Derek rot in a cell, though that was satisfying. The true revenge was this. It was seeing my daughter happy, strong, and completely free. Later that night, I drove to the Charles River alone. I reached into my bag and pulled out the tiny, hidden camera that had started it all. I weighed it in my hand for a moment. Then, with a flick of my wrist, I threw it. It splashed into the dark, cold water and sank into the depths, burying the last memory of the darkness forever. Thank you so much for listening to my story and walking this difficult journey with me. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story be heard by even more people.